Australia is not messing around when it comes to illegal immigration. And can you just give us the broad view? Because one of the things that got me interested in this was back in 2022 when they kept out Novak Djokovic, who wouldn't get the vaccine. And then it just led to an in-depth look at Australia in general is no stranger to saying, no, keep the hell out. They don't really care. And so how did they get that way? Has it always been thus?
Well, over the past sort of 20 years or so, about 20 years ago, there was this sort of great difference between Australians who believed, oh, I've got to be compassionate and anyone who can sort of float their way here should be able to become a citizen. But the reality was that people were dying in that journey. Now, most likely the path was to go from Indonesia, hop on a boat, pay $10,000 to a people smuggler, and then you eventually float your way towards Australia. You get here close enough, well, thanks for the effort, you're in. But thousands of people died while this was taking place. So the country was very clear where they turned around and said, no, yes, we're an island, but we don't care how you get here. You've got to come through the front door. So put simply, if you came here illegally, our position was that we will turn the boat around and we'll send you back. And if you try to sink the boat, we'll use our Navy and we'll get a sort of special lifeboat or something and turn that around and send it back. If you did happen to get here, you went into an offshore processing centre and put simply, you stayed there until you either decided to go home or you decided to go home.
Exactly. So it does have the advantage of being an island, right? I mean, it's this huge island right in the middle of the water. But you, as I understand it, were facing, trouble with people from Indonesia, people from China, elsewhere, really wanting to come live in the beautiful Australia. So while the problem is smaller in nature than ours, unfortunately, we are connected to, on the top and the bottom, it was significant. And so as I understand it, the main purpose of the harsh policies was deterrence. And therein is the most important lesson, I think, for America, because it being perceived as inhumane is kind of part of the point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole idea is that there's a front door. And in the same way that you don't cut the line when you go to Disney, if you still go to Disney, you don't cut the line when you're going to a diner or you're sitting down to a restaurant. You don't cut the line when it comes to immigration. If you fill out the paperwork, if you are, this amazing to be able to become a citizen, it'll happen. If you've got a skill for our country, that's fantastic. But otherwise, no. And you needed to send a message. And this is sort of the key message that I want to get to Americans, is you've got to have the idea that you have a country worth protecting by having a border, and you have to draw the line to say it is a privilege to be here, not a right that will be afforded to you if you can find a way to get here.
The way it's described, including in long pieces I've been reading in advance of this by detractors of the policy, is Australia, this is from a piece in the Diplomat magazine from 19, Australia is the only country that mandates immigration detention for all unlawful arrivals. It's like, you come here illegally, you're going into mandatory detention, including those seeking protection as refugees. Australia has one of the most punitive policies on forced migration in the world, and says Australia effectively punishes those who flee to the country for protection. Now, this is somebody who doesn't like the policy. But I'll tell you, most Americans would be reading this right now, Paul, and being like, good.
Yeah. Well, also don't forget here, the actual rules of being a refugee is that you go from, let's imagine that there's a problem particularly for you, and I don't know why I'm floating around in the background. I apologize.
I like it.
But
you got into the dark part of your speech.
Yeah, correct. You're in this scenario where if you're a refugee, the country you are being persecuted in, the place where you can claim your refugee status, is actually the location of the nearest safe country. In Australia, there are multiple countries before you get to us because we're an island, which means none of that counts. So the people who are turning up here are not refugees. They are people who are trying to shop for better access to welfare, because the reality about Australia is, while a lot of people would like to think that Australia is sort of one big version of Texas, the reality is that we are, Canada or the United Kingdom in terms of social welfare, but just with a lot more desert.
So what happens? Because I'm very interested in these detention facilities that are offshore. And by the way, what you just said is it aligns perfectly with the United States on a number of fronts, because most of the people seeking asylum in the United States are not Mexicans. You know, they're from Venezuela, they're from other points south. And this is one of the policies of the Trump administration, which was if you have not sought asylum in a country before you got here, and you're claiming you need asylum here, you're not eligible. Like, you have to prove why do you have to have it in the United States? Why'd you just pass right through Mexico without asking? So there are parallels. Well, but go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, exactly right. But also another one of the fundamental issues that we cleared up in our political language and in and around our debates 20 years ago was there is a difference between legal immigration and illegal immigration. But if I turn on MSNBC, they refer to people that are crossing the southern border by their millions as migrants, as if they're exactly the same as the people who came from, World War II to the United States to build the country. This is part of the problem, which is about how you view these people. Now, are they human? Should they be treated humanely? Of course. But there's a front door, and that's the only thing that matters about the system. So the offshore processing is about having a deterrent. Now, obviously, the numbers we're talking here are nowhere near the millions that you're dealing with in the United States. But it's very simple. If you end up in Mexico and you're trying to come from somewhere way back, down the map, well, guess what? Mexico's the safe place to go. America's not the safe place to go. So America has every right to say, well, bugger off, you can go back to the nearest safe country.
So how does Australia make sure that the people who are trying to come on by boat in this way, who haven't sought asylum at another island, another country before they got to you, or who aren't even really pretending to be asylum seekers, they're just trying to get into Australia, how do they do it? Do they have patrols all around? Is the coast all around Australia heavily patrolled?
Well, put simply, in terms of it's our west coast and sort of our northern west coast, which is what is most susceptible to the boats coming from Indonesia because of the land masses. The Navy is actually constantly flying up and down to see whether anything's there, satellites, all the rest of it. So as soon as they start to see something that will look like a boat, it's pretty obvious it's not going to be an official fishing vessel or something like that. As soon as they're able to work out that, geez, there's an awful lot of people on that boat, well, then you intercept it as soon as possible by literally sending someone from the Navy at speed to meet them as physically close to the Indonesian side of the line than the Australian side of the line. Now, just how close it gets to the Australian waters, well, again, if you make it that far, you're off to a place called Nauru, which is an island country off to our west. Our government gave a lot of money to that country, or you move up to a place called Papua New Guinea, which is just to the north. But again, the whole point being that you'll never physically get here. But it's basically using the military. So in the same way that the southern border, has some sort of protection, the idea that it is semi-federalised agencies and these confusions about whether the Texas National Guard can do something. No. It's the Australian Defence Force that is in charge of this one, and that's presumably what I would suggest you need in the US.
So it's basically, not only are you not coming into Australia, but we're going to send you off to this other little island that we're paying a bunch of money to process you people, and you're really not going to be able to enjoy the fruits of Australian living while we adjudicate what to do with you. That's what, as you well know, what we're seeing right now is, even today, there's a report about the illegals in New York who are about to get food cards so that they can basically have a little credit card waiting for them so they can go to, and they say, oh, well, as long as you don't spend it on anything other than food or I think school supplies, then you can continue to have it. Like, someone's actually going to be auditing these people and their spending. We don't even know where they are or who they are. In any event, we make such a lure, right? We're like, come on in, we'll get you papers, we'll get you a job. They have several blue state governors advocating for an expedited work permitting process for these people. We're giving them free lodging in Manhattan in 3-star hotels. It's literally the opposite of what you were doing on the islands. And let's be honest, where they stay on these islands, it's not exactly the Four Seasons.
No, particularly Nauru. Nauru is basically an island of phosphorus, otherwise known as bird poo. And literally, it's fossilized over the years, and that's where it is. It's not a pleasant existence. It's not a hotel. It's not inhumane that you're sleeping in tents and exposed to the weather and all the rest of it, but there's not a great life there. There's, the social life of the other people that are sitting there. But I do have to point out that there have been moments where, yes, a court here or there, or, a certain series of activists have been able to pierce a hole in it. But the Australian public is so definite about this position. Now, sure, the far left and the far right might be somewhere else, but the sort of 80% bulk, regardless of whether you're team red or team blue, believe in this offshore processing system. So essentially, whenever there's a hole that's exposed in the system, laws are passed to make sure that system can continue and be refortified. So, but again, the thing that I'm amazed by the US, and again, there's nothing more arrogant than somebody from another part of the world telling you how you should do things, but allow me, which is, when you've got a better social welfare system for the people who arrived here illegally than the people who, for whatever reason, end up on the streets of San Francisco, you've got a problem. Now, you would think that all of the social justice warriors would see this, but instead they have this sort of infantilized idea that every single person who's crossing the border is somebody who's on the bones of their backside and is doing this so that they can make a better life for their family. But the reality is that there's an awful lot of people who know that there is a better life in the United States with greater protections in the United States and even the minimum wage in the United States that is better than the life that they have in other parts of Latin America, which means they are economic migrants. They are not refugees. They are economic asylum seekers.
Sorting through your expense tracking, estimated payments, and all those deductions is overwhelming. It might lead to a failure to file or failure to pay penalties that pile up on your tax debt. Here's an idea. The attorneys at Tax Network USA have been lifesavers for many. Their team has successfully saved clients over $1 billion in tax debts. Whether you're in the hole for 10 grand or staring at a $10 million debt, they are ready to help. Even if you haven't filed in 1, 5, or 10 years, the expert attorneys and tax pros at Tax Network USA are equipped to secure the best settlement for you and to help you resolve all tax cases no matter how they started. Go to tnusa.com/Megyn, tnusa.com/Megyn, or call 1-800-245-6000. Contact them now as these tax debt relief programs are expected to change. tnusa.com/Megyn, or call 1-800-245-6000 and tell them Megyn Kelly sent you. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.